Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on digital media predictions for 2022. It's my pleasure to have Mr. Raghav Bahl on the panel with us. Raghav needs no introduction. We're all aware of his work, what we've witnessed his achievements, be it founding and scaling the Network 18 group to running Quint Digital now with brands like the Quint, Bloomberg Quint, Youth Ki Awaaz, News Minute, and Quintype. Raghav is one of the most accomplished news editors in the country today and has also authored multiple bestsellers. Some of you might be his followers on social media and have connected with him there. So here's your opportunity to hear him live and ask him questions too. So a bit about the format of the webinar. We will have a Q&A, basically a conversation with Raghav for the first 35 to 40 minutes. If you have questions along the way, please post it on the chat and the team here will consolidate those questions towards the end. We will address most of the questions at the end of the conversation after the first 40 minutes. So without further ado, let's get started. Hi, Raghav. How are you?
Hi, Chirdeep. Hi, good to be with you. Thank you for the kind words.
So I want to get started off with the recent incidents of the pandemic. For the last 2 years, I think all of us, the world around us has changed. We've been in multiple lockdowns. A whole bunch of things have changed around the world and in the media space as well, right? So the first wave, at least from our lens, the first wave we saw it, the way we saw it was print came to a grinding halt. Digital and broadcast started taking on a lot more viewership, a lot more traffic out there. But unfortunately, the ad rates plummeted. Nobody was advertising. Digital media, a lot of small digital media companies actually went out of business in the first wave, simply because there's not enough revenue from ads. Fast forward towards 2021, late 2021, it looks like the ad revenues have gone up significantly, even beyond the pre-COVID levels at this point. That's what we are hearing. We're seeing when we advertise on the digital media space as well. Do you see this trend continuing in 2022? Actually, do you see this happening with your properties in 2021? And do you see this trend continuing in 22 as well?
Yeah, so now, Chirdeep, when you say that ad rates plummeted or ad revenue plummeted, I put it slightly differently, because when the pandemic happened, clearly we all stopped getting newspapers. So that was a shock to the system because you're used to getting your news in the morning. And also, you stopped going out for entertainment, theaters, etc. So very conventional ways of media consumption came to a very abrupt grinding halt. And therefore, people took to the alternate forms of consumption, and therefore digital really came into its own and people started consuming, whether it's entertainment, whether it's news, everything went on digital platforms. So I don't think there was a collapse of revenue in a generic sense. There was a postponement. There were people dealing with uncertainty. Every business was dealing with uncertainty. You could make out at that point in time that this is going to be a generic shift. This is not a one-time shift. This is a generic shift. And therefore, when things became a little bit more certain, when the uncertainty ebbed away, revenues would come back much more dramatically for digital platforms, for the very simple reason that audiences had shifted as well. So when you say that revenues collapsed, I would say it was a question of people just postponing that decision and trying to come to grips with the uncertainty that had engulfed all our lives. And I think that phase possibly lasted for maybe 3 to 4 months. When the lockdown happened in March, I think all of us were quite taken aback at how we were able to maintain our operations, because first that came as a revelation that you could, all of us could be sitting at home and yet operations could continue, and yet content could be produced in a very, very distributed sort of manner from households. So that was the first sense of confidence one got, that the world hasn't collapsed, it's a different world. And then once the content and the operation stabilized, then I think even the advertiser began to realize that this is not Armageddon, this is not the end of the world, that there is now a very, very new way of working, and therefore very, very new way of consuming, and therefore there will be a very, very new way of advertising to the new consumption patterns. So I think that's the cycle we saw. Of course, then came the second wave, and again, people went on to hold. But in the second wave, it was more a tragedy than something that was uncertain. The uncertainty by then had already been internalized to a large extent, dealt with to a large extent. You knew now how you would continue to live until this menace evaporated. But what happened was the tragedy. So I think that the tragedy led people to postpone rather than the uncertainty. And when that wave ebbed, I think things came back, as you said, in 2021, and now coming into 2022. You are seeing much more. The uncertainty has almost abated completely. When I say, I'm not talking about the uncertainty of the pandemic, I'm talking about the uncertainty caused by the changes wrought by the pandemic. I think that we have now come to accept that this hybrid working method will be a way of life. You don't need to go out and travel for every small transaction. You can do a lot of it sitting at home because 90% of the transactions, honestly, whether it's content creation, whether it's commercial transactions, if I'm seeing you face to face across the screen, that's pretty much as effective as being in the room with you. Of course, there is that 10% which can only be done face to face, and that's really what I think all of us are accepted. So I think that's what we've seen. Uncertainty has ebbed, audiences have shifted, and of course, revenues have shifted.
Okay. And you'd see that continue in 2022 as well, where the ad revenues will only go up. Your CPM rates will only go up from here.
Yeah. So now, when we talk about ad revenues, one, of course, is the rates that we talk about. And when we talk about CPMs, we are talking a lot about programmatic or display sort of revenue. But in digital, because it is two-way interaction with the consumer, plus it's not one platform that you are advertising. That I think is the major difference in digital media and traditional linear or print media, where you're actually advertising one platform. If it's a television channel, then the television channel is the platform on which you will release your ad, and the people who are watching the ad will be the consumers of that ad. Likewise, in newspapers, you get your ad placed in page 3, page 4, page 5, and that's really where it stays. But because digital media is not consumed in one platform, it's a multi-platform distribution, and it's multimedia. You're not just telling your story in one media format, you're telling your story in several media formats. Therefore, the advertising is also distributed. So, the CPM rate is really one part of the advertising solution that you go to a client with. And that solution has a lot to do with how you may distribute your content on different platforms, and therefore give opportunities to the advertiser to advertise on the same, on different platforms in multimedia formats. Branded content bundled with display. So I believe that CPM and ad rate is a small part right now of the way digital content is monetized through different advertising solutions. A lot of it is really branded content. A lot of it is also distributed across different platforms. I may put your message on a Reels, I may put your message on my website, I may tag your message along with my video on YouTube. And all of these messages often also take on a different form because of the distributed platform. All of that was never possible in linear or in legacy media, where it was a fairly blunt standard advertising message that went through. The 30-second commercial on television and the sort of half-page block ad in newspaper. That was pretty much the confines of your innovation as far as advertising message is concerned.
Right. And hopefully in 2022, this will be the year where events will make a comeback.
Yes. I mean, I think all of us are hoping for that, because again, an event is a very powerful content come messaging device. And again, on digital, your ability to distribute it across different platforms, as opposed to, again, in legacy where it comes only in one form, or linear it comes in one form. I'm sure will be a force multiplier. We wait for the ground events to begin.
Right. So also there are these pivotal years that you come across, right? When there's the multiple world events, there's elections, all of that. 2022 seems to have a mixture of all of them. There are state elections that are coming up. Towards the end of the year, and there's Winter Olympics that's in February. Towards the end of the year, there's the T20 World Cup, there is the FIFA World Cup, all of this. With the kind of coverage that we expect across news organizations, do we expect traffic also to increase this year along with these events?
Yeah, it goes without saying. And again, I come back when Chirdeep, when we talk about traffic, the power of digital again is distributed traffic. So it's not only distributed content, it's distributed advertising and it's distributed traffic. So while my website traffic, direct website traffic, may be showing a far more, sort of moderate gradient, maybe growing at a very, very predictable sort of 5% a quarter or 10% a quarter kind of growth. But my ability to take that same content, tweak it for different distributed platforms, and then see the growth happening in those platforms. And we are seeing that. You talk about short videos, you talk about memes, you talk about graphic cards, you talk about social media propagation of chunks of content. That's growing exponentially. So my touch points for my audience are certainly growing exponentially, while you may see a far more moderate gradient in website traffic, which is now the equivalent of legacy. In the digital world, website traffic is possibly legacy.
Okay. Yeah. How soon things become legacy here?
Yes.
Okay, great. Moving on around the formats, you mentioned different channels where you distribute. It also, we see different formats, multimedia, as you mentioned, right? So, especially in the Reuters report that came out recently, journalism predictions for 2022, they look at podcasts and audio, and every publisher, as we know it, is betting hugely on audio and podcasts in India as well as the rest of the world. So rest of the world, we see a lot less people moving around. Podcasts are mainly listened to while you're driving. That seems to have come down a bit, but sitting at home, also people do listen to podcasts. In India, it seems like audio is really going up on the curve as such. What's your take on podcasts and audio? Is it a particular segment of audience? Is it urban, rural? Is it across all spectrum? And as a publisher, should I be betting heavily on audio in 2022?
So, podcasts are important, but I come back to what to me is the most powerful trend in digital media. It is you cannot focus all your energies on one slice. Because content is available for you to version in different media, different formats, you must leverage it completely. So if I have a big interview that I have with a big politician, now there's absolutely no reason why I cannot put out a podcast version of it. I cannot put out a video version of it. I cannot put out a slice it up into small Instagram reels kind of shorter videos. I cannot curate a nice print copy out of it. So I think podcast is extremely important, but it is one content dissemination device. And if you were to therefore focus all your energies on it, you have to make a choice of what kind of business model you are in. There are going to be the deep verticals and the deep specialists, and some of them may be just podcast only players. But my experience in the last few years tells me that your digital is a very, very powerful multimedia, multi-platform environment. And if you have the resources to be able to be present on different media formats and different platforms, then you must do that. Otherwise, you confine yourself into a hyper specialist vertical. Nothing wrong with it. Hyper specialist verticals also do very, very well, but they don't end up getting scale.
But you don't necessarily need all the resources. Tech can help a lot in that front, right? You have text to speech. You can automatically transcribe the entire interview into an audio podcast as such, and with actual voices. Today, you can train with your own voice. You can have these things read up. So that's something that tech can cover the gap out here.
Oh no, absolutely. A lot of tech will be needed and is already being deployed in tweaking the same piece of content into different multimedia slices on different distributed platforms. Tech certainly will enable you to do it. Otherwise it's a laborious process if you were to do everything manually and everything with the old tools at your disposal. Then you could be spending a week trying to tweak the same piece of content, by which time it's sort of lost a lot of its relevance and punch. So tech is really woven into this multimedia, multi-platform, output that you have to put out in the digital world.
Yeah. My next question was around videos, but I'm guessing it's going to be similar. It's about you need to be present in all of these formats and not just one. And particularly, I want to draw your attention to short format videos. Are publishers taking a lot towards short format videos? Is that something garnering attention now?
Inevitable, absolutely inevitable. Again, because audiences are there, audiences are consuming that, and nothing stops you from being a first-time consumer of a short duration piece of content. And if you like it, nothing absolutely stops you from either clicking through or searching and going and seeing the full piece for yourself. So there's no question about it that is today the fastest growing segment in the media world. The short format video on these social media platforms, on these fast growing social media platforms. And in that, video is easily the most powerful component of that, growth wise, impact wise, engagement wise, consumption wise. So no quarrel with that. Anecdotally, I can tell you that when I do a video, which may be typically 7, 8, 9 minutes for a YouTube audience, but when you put out a 1 minute reel of that, now just to give you a sense of how the sort of multi-platform consumption happens, I may end up getting 8,000, 10,000 views on YouTube, but on the 1 minute reels version of that could notch up 40,000, 50,000 views in no time, compared to the time it takes for those 8,000 views to come through on YouTube. Similarly, Twitter is a universe by itself, and it's somewhere in between the two. And you might find that you're getting a far more engaged audience, although a smaller number in Twitter. But then you have to be everywhere. If you have to version your content to be on different platforms. Right.
And coming on to newsletters right now, right? I think we spoke about different content formats, but channel as a newsletter, it seemed to have had its own ups and downs. A few years ago, a lot of publishers just abandoned newsletters because it was going to the spam folder. People were not engaged so much, but it seems to be making a huge comeback, particularly because you're connected directly to the audience. You know their email address, you know some information about them that you can connect with them. So are newsletters something that you see as a trend that most publishers are now taking on? Or is it something that is just here to stay for a few more years?
No, I think, newsletter, let's parse in newsletters relevance. Again, if you were going to make one newsletter for everybody, then I think your click-through rates, your open rates are going to be average, perhaps even below average, because there's so much stuff that comes into your inbox today that you're not driven to click. However, now this whole argument turns on its head when it's a specialist newsletter, which is satisfying a special need or a special interest of mine. I may be a lawyer, for instance, who gets a very curated newsletter of the key judgments and legal ratios and legal arguments that took place. Now, my engagement level with that will be very high because it's a piece of specialist content which I need, which is of special interest to me. Likewise with investment newsletters. Likewise with newsletters about venture capital investments. These are specialist interest newsletters created for specialist communities. There, the engagement level and the interaction level is very high. So the long and the short of it is that if you're going to create a hold-all newsletter, you will have the hold-all person who likes to get his, who's got a wide range of interest, and therefore he likes to scan the headlines, and he will then go and pick up 2 or 3 things that he may read, but he may even equally do that via his social media feeds, because his friends and his interest is coming at him from, on his Twitter feed, on his Facebook feed, on his other social media feeds, on his LinkedIn feed. But the minute you create a special interest newsletter, which I know I need, then my engagement level is very, very high, very, very high. So I think you'll have to have newsletters transforming themselves into highly special interest vehicles. And therefore, technology comes in and plays again a role, because once again, if you can map my interests, if you can map what I actually go and spend a lot of time on, then you can start tweaking the kind of newsletter that reaches me. So again, technology will have to start, creating special interest output for different people. So I think it's that. Are we saying we should be abandoning them? Not at all. Are we saying we should have a moderate level of expectation and treat a newsletter also as one more potential outreach to your consumer, part of that entire distributed platform that I've been talking about? The more you can tweak it to answer my special need and special interest, then you'll find my engagement factor going up with it.
Talking about newsletters, we saw a very interesting model last year in 2020 and 2021. I think the one around creator economy, as the rest of the world calls it. We saw a lot of independent journalists taking on to the likes of Substack. Now Facebook has FB Bulletin, and then Twitter has its own product called Review and all of that. Right? These are newsletter-driven subscription products. So I don't need a fancy CMS. I don't need the entire workflow. I have a simple CMS that lets me write my content, put it behind a newsletter paywall as such, and subscribers can subscribe to it. And we see some of the well-known journalists, Cassie Newton, for example, from New York Times, has moved on to Substack. And he's written a very nice blog about how much a journalist can earn out of that. Do you see a trend of independent journalists moving and writing their own newsletters? Because there is a revenue channel out of that. Or is it more of a 5-95 part where only 5% of the journalists will actually make the money and 95 will have to give their content for free?
It is 595, and this is the same version that would have happened, say, 40 years ago, when someone who became a big name in the world of journalism in some particular area, say investigative, say investment, where they reached a sort of brand recognition of their work. And then what did they do? They would then walk out of a job, because then it's not necessary for them to be filing 95% of the stuff that they're not interested in. And they became super specialist columnists. What was that? You are really creating a specialist column, which a very, very eager set of consumers and readers were engaged with. Now, then you needed the newspaper, or you needed that show on television to be able to put your content out. Today, you don't need that. Today, you can create your own Substack and reach out. So for someone who has achieved a level of intellectual brand recognition and following, and that 5% of the people would be able to do that, 95 will not. 95 would need a vehicle to amplify their work. You will find that they will do that. But this is a current day technological manifestation of an old phenomenon, that once you get intellectual brand recognition, then you don't need to be in an employment, in a full-time employment, because then your ability to earn from your specialist column, your books, your speaking engagements pays for, professionally pays for you, which is exactly what happens here. It's just that they don't now need a newspaper to put that column out. They can put it out themselves, because again, you've got your ability to reach out directly to your reader, because technology and digital platforms permit you to do that. So it is really a modern day manifestation of a fairly timeless phenomenon, that as people become independent in their ability to attract followers and audiences, then they don't need to be working within the confines of an organization.
Okay. Great. So you've also, I think you've been very clear saying that you cannot have a one size fits all kind of a strategy in digital media, right? And I believe a lot of, at least from our analytics, a lot of our publishers get significant amount of traffic from social media. Social media and search forms roughly about 30% each in terms of traffic split across. I'm talking on an average. Some of them may have less, some of them may have more, of course. Yeah. The past few years saw Facebook and Twitter getting a lot of eyeballs and getting a lot of traffic from those social media channels into the publisher's network. but seems the trend seems to be shifting into things like Instagram, messaging apps, short video apps. I know you need to be present in all. You can't just leave Facebook and go. But if you were to prioritize, would the newer messaging apps be a higher priority for you today than Facebook and Twitter, or will the old horses still continue to garner the attention?
Yeah, I think you could make a very big mistake by trying to prioritize. The priority in the sense that if it's a new platform, then you need to learn the learnings of the new platform. Therefore, that will necessarily get a little bit more attention from you because you've already, quote unquote, mastered the older platforms, and therefore they've fallen into your propagation on those platforms has fallen into much more of a structure, much more of a routine, much more of a team which is already well trained in doing that. But if a new platform comes in, you need to invest that time and attention in trying to understand the workings of that new platform, the tweaks of that new platform, the innovations of that new platform, the strengths of that new platform. So in that sense, priority, yes. But the minute you were to start saying, all right, I don't think I need the old war horse, but I will go only for the new war horse, then I think you're making an unnecessary mistake. Why would you leave a distribution platform? Because today's digital world and technology makes it so easy for you to be on all of them. Why would you then willingly give up a component of your audience? I agree that it is, it may not be growing at the same pace as it was. And that's a reality. But it still may bring you a demographic which the newer platforms may not bring you. The 45 plus demographic may still be coming to me from Twitter and may not therefore be coming to me as much from Instagram as, say, the 20-year-old demographic, which comes to me much more from Instagram. But if my content is content aimed at that full spectrum, and all I need to do is tweak a bit of that content for the 20-year-old Instagrammer versus the 45-year-old Twitter follower, I must do that, right? I mean, today there is so much interest in Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose because he's been dominating the narrative for the last 3 or 4 days. Now, there is as much interest in understanding who he was from a 20-year-old to someone who's 45, 50, who may be wanting also to discover who this freedom fighter was that I haven't heard so much of in the past, but suddenly seems to be so important that he's occupying prime of place in Rajpath in Delhi. But the needs, the two, while the curiosity gets tickled the same way for a 45-year-old and a 20-year-old, how you satisfy that curiosity, with what you satisfy the curiosity, the depth to which you go and satisfy that curiosity is very different. And therefore, the kind of output you will put out on both platforms will be different, but will be satisfying the same curiosity.
Yeah, so my question is not either or. I think you're right. You will go through all channels. The issue is access to resources. Like as a publisher, you would still engage your audience on various channels. You will need to comment. You will need to reply to that. So you would not have unlimited resources to reply on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and everything. So that was my question on priority.
No, you're right. I mean, there you'll have to prioritize that kind of resource. That where is it that you want a bigger engagement? If you really do still want a bigger engagement on your Twitter platform, then you will deploy your limited resources and time in engaging more there and answering questions there versus in Instagram. I think those are calls that each editorial property has to take for itself. Where is its primary audience, or where is the audience that it wants to primarily engage with, and where is possibly a little bit of the secondary audience. But the fact that you are today either you're a super specialist, and if you're not a super specialist and you wish to be a news brand with a large following amongst different demographics, then you have no option but possibly to do less but engage more, rather than do more and engage less. I would be much bigger a votary of do less, engage more, than try and scatter fire everything and then not be able to engage.
Great. That's a fantastic mantra to have. Do less, engage more. Great. Great. So moving on, I think this is probably one of the most important topics for the previous years as well as going forward, which is around subscriptions and reader revenue.
Yes.
We see, as per the report from Reuters, about 80% of all publishers have said subscriptions will be their most important priority this year, right? And everybody is looking at some form of reader revenue coming in on their properties, on their mobile apps, on their web apps, any other channel that they distribute on. Do you see that a lot of publishers will go behind a paywall? We're seeing that with niche publishers. We're seeing that as expected with financial news sites, right? So those are the first ones across the world to go behind a paywall. But do you see regular news sites also going behind a paywall? Something like the Quint, Indian Express, India Today, all of this is news that I would get on the other sites as well, right? So would you think that these sites will also go behind a paywall soon?
Yeah, Chirdeep, this is a real, hot conundrum kind of question. And I would really hesitate to give very pat answers. I think we are still in the middle of learning. So at our end, if I was to share our experience, we've got one property, BQ, Bloomberg Quint, which is really a predominantly paid property. We put it behind a subscription. There is, of course, it's a premium. You get 2 or 3 articles free, but the really premium content is behind a paywall. It's behind a hard paywall. You have to pay to get it. Then is the Quint, which is a far more broad spectrum product, which is a younger product aiming at younger audiences, which is a much more widely distributed product. Remember, wide distribution is inversely proportional to your ability to monetize on subscription. Because if you're going to put your product, if you're going to put your content out on every conceivable platform, then your ability to make it into a pay platform gets diminished. It's inversely proportional. So those are calls that we have to take, keeping in mind the content strategy, keeping in mind the revenue strategy. So we've learned from both these initiatives of ours. And the lessons, as I said, I would be extremely careful in trying to be too pat and too formulaic, and coming to it saying, yeah, I think we've seen the future. I don't think we've seen the future. Clearly, in a Bloomberg Quint, as you said, financial sites, pretty much proven now that since they have a financial utility for the reader, since there is the ability to create value out of your knowledge. By value, I mean monetizable value. People are willing to pay, and therefore we've seen that by putting ourselves behind the paywall there, that is clearly a subscription strategy that's working. But would I be so pat about it when it comes to the Quint? I don't think so. I think the jury's out, because while financial is one bit, the second is the ones which have got brand power. So the New York Times, the Economist, these have got fantastic brand power because they've been around for 100 years. Their journalism is the kind of journalism that is pristine, it's original. They break news, they go into areas where it requires great resources they send reporters. So, and that's 100 years of sort of brand power that is built in. They can also put a lot of their content behind paywall. Not all of it, a lot of it, because the brand power pulls in consumers. The challenge is for people like the Quint, which are new and upcoming properties. They don't have 100-year-old brand power. They certainly are building brand power. In certain demographics, their brand power may actually be equal to the 100-year-old brand power because you don't have the handicap of age. Let's say Instagram. In Instagram, I don't have the handicap of age. I am as young, as fresh, as powerful as the Times of India or Indian Express, while they be 100-year-old brands. But in this particular niche, I have no such handicap because I am as old as them in this niche, and therefore I can be far more experimental. But then this niche doesn't lend itself to subscriptions. This niche is not a niche which can pay 3,000 rupees a year or 4,000 rupees a year. They are students. They won't be able to, and you'll make a blunder by trying to convert that part of the audience into it. So I think the jury is out for products like the Quint. which are fast growing, powerful, which are creating a footprint which is very powerful, but in demographics which are not yet, which haven't yet reached their ability to pay. So you could be actually throwing the baby out with the bathwater if you were to make too quick a move in going pay there. And therefore, and there's one more category, which is the super specialist category. The super specialist category will be pay everywhere. You know, if I'm giving you this one article every day, which will tell you, or two articles every day, which will break stunning news for you. Now there'll be 5,000, 10,000 people, 15,000 really special interest people who will pay for that. So the super specialist deep vertical will always be a pay property, but it's a small property. The brand, the powerful 100-year brand can be and will be a freemium, part free, but that brand will pull in the ability to for consumers to pay, force them to pay. Then there are the financial guys who will always have the ability to pay. It's the Quint, properties like the Quint, with a large footprint, growing audience base, growing advertising base. Their ability to go pay, I think today the jury's out. There, what we are seeing, and you alluded to it, are the membership models, where you try and monetize reader revenue. Now, often people speak of membership and subscription in the same breath. They're actually as different as chalk and cheese. They both are reader revenue, yes. They both require you to take out your credit card or your debit card or your pay card, and for you to go through a payment gateway and to pay. That is where the similarity ends. Because a subscription product is purely related to content. It's purely related to content. It has no ideological veneer. It has no value system attached to it. While a membership is actually much more a value system decision, is much more an ideological decision, not ideological political, ideological of a value system. Do I support gender equality? Do I support rights of LGBTQ? Do I support free market economy? Do I support a particular narrow interest group? And if I do support and I find resonance in certain content platforms for the kind of value system that I support, then I will go and become a member. So it's largely, while subscription is 100% for content, it has got no veneer of any value system or ideological veneer. A membership plan, on the other hand, I would say is 80% driven by an ideological or a value system, and only 20% for content which resonates with that value system. So they have two very different models. But properties like the Quint or the News Minute, these are properties that can certainly and must develop membership models. But subscription, I think, is, as I said, I think you have to watch. You have to watch how this space evolves over the next few years. Because you also have a very vibrant, growing advertising revenue line. Why would you jeopardize that? And also the fact that your content cost base in digital is much smaller than the content cost base for legacy players. So if you've got a smaller cost base, you've got a more technology-enabled product, you've got mass distributed platforms, different platforms that you distribute your content on, and you have a vibrant advertising revenue line, then I would say you should be extremely careful in trying to take that leap of faith into subscription prematurely.
And even if you do, right? So the issue I have as a digital subscriber myself is today I subscribe to 5 or 6 different outlets, right? And that costs a lot of money. You're paying 3,000 on average per website, and then or per publisher, and you're looking at close to about 15 to 20,000 a year that you're spending across these properties. There is subscription fatigue going to kick in at some point of time, right? Subscribers are not going to read an article today. If I land up on a site, I need to subscribe to at least for 3 months or 1 year or something like that. There is that subscription fatigue setting in already. How do you break this? Do we see micropayments, or do we see the likes of paper article, any of that coming through?
Yeah, so we at Bloomberg Quint, we were the first really serious paper article property in India. But we realized that it's too tiny. It's too tiny because either I am convinced about the value proposition that you bring to me, and then I'm saying, all right, rather than flash my credit card every day to read one article or the other, it's a pain. Remember, consumers are looking to get away from pain points, right? I mean, it's
But
a big, yeah.
There is tech that solves that for you. There is a buy now, pay later or wallets.
It is, but it is still 2 more clicks or 3 more clicks for me. And on the other hand, if I am a subscriber, then I know that this thing is available to me through the year for all that I bought. So I think micropayments and a tiny fractions, I believe, and globally that's been proven. Actually, it's a tiny fraction. It's not a very large. I mean, yes, there will be that super specialist article where there'll be something that Chirdeep really wants to read, and it's published on some platform, and it's available only for $5. How many times would you do that in a year? 3, 4, 5, not more than that, because that kind of super specialist article that you have to read. And remember, there is a lot of leakage which happens. You get it on a PDF forward from some friend. So, all of that also happens. Those are realities, right? You have to build a business on realities. You can't build a business in vacuum. So I personally don't think that's the issue. I think you're absolutely right about subscription fatigue. I think people will subscribe to, there will be your primary subscription and there'll be your secondary subscription in every sort of interest area, say finance, say sports. I don't think you'll go for more than 2 subscriptions in a particular interest space. Max will be 2, and therefore if you're a person who's got, say, sort of you're interested in 3 things or 4 things in life, gaming and possibly financial news and possibly general news, then you'll probably be a 4 or 5 subscription person. That's about it that you'll handle. I agree, that's a reality, which is why a lot of sites will have to live with a much larger preponderance of advertising revenue. I know this probably goes in the face of what conventional wisdom is in digital, but I can only speak from my own experience of the last 4 or 5 years. I personally believe that advertising revenue lines are vibrant, are buoyant, and they will become more vibrant and buoyant as audiences coalesce more and more into digital. The challenge is in keeping your cost under control. The challenge is in using tech to further your engagement. The challenge is in using your content and tweaking it into different multimedia slices for distributed platforms. Those are the challenges which you should be addressing yourself to, rather than getting trapped right now in the subscription. Subscription will work for a particular kind of product, but for a particular, like you said, there's fatigue. You can't, no one will have 10 subscriptions. No one will. On maximum, you'll have 4 or 5, and you won't go beyond that. So a lot of us will have to decide that there is life in advertising, and we need to maximize that, because I think that part of the business has also just begun to evolve. No, it hasn't matured at all. Where it ends up, and the kind of sort of growth that comes from various distributed platforms, you don't know today. You don't know the full potential of an Instagram today in terms of bringing you advertising revenue. You don't. So you'll have to be very focused on ensuring that your costs are under control, your content is high quality, and your content is tweaked and distributed in different platforms, and therefore opens up newer advertising revenue lines for you. And at a point in time where your brand becomes powerful enough and you are willing to experiment with subscription, I would say go for it, but I would say again, go for it in niches. Don't try and put the whole site behind a paywall. You could end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Okay. Close to the 45-minute mark, I'm just going to ask the last couple of questions I had. We're seeing a lot of consolidation in digital media, in media, particularly in the US. Do you see something similar happening in India in the coming years?
Oh, inevitable. It has to happen. It absolutely has to happen. It must happen. It's going to be extremely difficult for the lone ranger to survive. The lone ranger can survive only as a super specialist, very deep vertical, And in which case you're really selling a proposition, and that's what you've decided to be in life, that I want to be selling this one proposition. That's fine. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. You're a super specialist. You've got a tunnel that you're focusing on. You want to be the best in that tunnel and you want to charge. That person will survive. But the minute you want to be a slightly larger spectrum player, then it's going to be very difficult to survive as a single point of view. You will have to consolidate audiences across entertainment, sport. So you'll have to have specialist offerings in several of these areas with dedicated audiences. And then your ability to, cross pollinate audiences. I mean, the same guy watches, sport on the weekend is the same guy who is possibly a big reader of opinion blogs on weekdays. Is the same guy is possibly also very interested in the venture capital, private equity space. So your ability then to have this person in your ecosystem will only be possible if you actually go out and consolidate a lot of properties with, which bring specialist audiences and specialist content under single ownership. I mean, that's inevitable. It has to happen because only scale will survive at that end. So deep vertical will survive, scale will survive. The guy in between has to make up his mind.
Okay, great. I think thanks for that clarity of thought. And finally, around the tech innovations, right? So I think there's a lot to be said about tech innovations. We are particularly in that space ourselves. And going by the report this year, most people say that at least a lot of publishers, 51% according to the report, say that they don't have enough money to invest in tech. Tech is expensive. It is a huge expense, at least to start off with. So a lot of people do not have the money to put into tech. And further, the question is, what kind of innovation do you think we'll see in this space? Particularly things around AI, recommendation engine, and content tagging. Those are table stakes right now. Almost every publisher we know, every large publisher uses AI in some way or the other on their platform, mainly to either serve good content or tagging, SEO, better SEO. All of that is pretty much table stakes at this point. What else do we see as AI generated tech that publishers will use? Will they start creating news on the fly based on, let's say, some time series data, market data, or anything like that? Are those that will come on the forefront this year?
I don't know. Maybe I'm old school in that. Machines trying to put together good editorial. I've been proved horribly wrong several times in the past, and I may be proved completely wrong on this one as well. But I think the human mind has a malleability and a uniqueness which machines will possibly not be able to create as far as knowledge and wisdom and editorial content is concerned. So I think that may stay as on the fringes, not really become mainstream. And I may be totally wrong in that. But your observation that we don't invest enough in technology. I think it's always, these things happen in waves, right? When you're setting up, you necessarily have to invest a lot in technology because you're just setting up from scratch. And then you realize that you spent a hell of a lot of money and revenue still, are taking their time coming in. So you put a little stop and say, all right, this is the time to focus on making my product viable. That's the time at which your technology investments go into virtually maintenance mode. I mean, that's the reality of doing businesses, right? But then when revenues have picked up again, then you realize that now you can invest a little bit more in tech, and therefore you can sharpen your analytics engine, you can sharpen your recommendation engine, you can even try a bit of AI. I mean, who knows? You can even try and say, all right, let's create some content with AI. Maybe some quick videos of breaking news, all of which is easy because breaking news, you're not looking at any other visual, you're looking at just that visual of something on fire or something crashing, or and your machines then would have the ability to turn around that video very quickly. So I think you will see this stop-start investment in technology because ultimately it has to be viable, right? I can keep on making as much investment as I want, and ultimately, why do you have people like Quintype? You can outsource a lot of your technology headache to you guys and really do much more of the front end stuff while you take care of the back end.
Yeah, thanks for that bit of advertisement. We will gladly take that. Also around the metaverse, right? We see that a lot of publishers are going down, or particularly Facebook in that sense, right? It's pretty much rebranded itself as Meta. We see Microsoft going down that path. We see a lot of these big tech companies investing heavily in the metaverse right now. And as weird as it is right now in our lives, we see weddings taking part in metaverse. We see a concert taking place in metaverse. People are buying land in the metaverse, right? So this is basically what's happening as we speak. How do you see? Do you think news channels will take on to that? Do you think we'll have a virtual debate as such with people and their avatars sitting in that studio? Is that something that will come soon?
Yeah. So the minute I think if consuming, if sustained long consumption with those goggles on and your ability to see 3D, your ability to be immersed in 3D, if I'm caveating what I'm going to say with that. If that is a pleasurable experience, if it doesn't make me dizzy, if I, after 45 minutes don't want to take away and throw it away because I've had enough, and I want to just lay back a bit and watch my television or my OTT platform the way I'm used to watching it, just laying back and seeing it in 2D, but it's a pleasurable experience. Assuming that 3D is immersive 3D is a pleasurable experience. If I assume that, then I think you can pretty much bet that a lot of content consumption will move there. But my point is, I'm caveating it by saying, I hope it is a pleasurable experience. I hope it's not too much of a lean forward engagement. Your eyes are getting, it's telling on your eyes, it's telling on your mind. And then after 1 hour, you say, forget it. It may be 2D, but at least it's pleasurable. I'll watch it. I'll watch it either on my phone or on my screen. But having said that, if it is a pleasurable experience, if it's an easy experience, then it goes without saying, Chirdeep, if I can transport myself into the IPL cricket stadium and be quote unquote, sitting with a lot of people and watching cricket unfolding in 3D before me, why would I not do it? Why would I not take part in it? Why would I not be able to take part in a television debate with 100 other people if I can question the Prime Minister directly? Because the Prime Minister is also a part of that 3D interaction. So, it goes without saying that if it is an easy experience, of course it will take over. Because, if you're showing me, if you're showing me a riot, and I have the ability to be a safe spectator in the middle of that riot, then I would, right? It's so much more a rich experience than seeing it recorded. But I think the jury's out on how easy it's going to be. Of course, the biggest tech companies in the world are investing so much money in it. I'm sure they'll end up making it pleasurable. But oftentimes, you have seen that, consumer behavior is a funny thing. Theoretically, it may sound very good, but if it's not easy for the consumer, classic is the goggle, the Google goggle. It was supposed to change the world, but consumers didn't take to it because it's not easy. I don't want to be wearing the damn thing all the time. I want, I'm happy to see 2D as long as it's pleasurable, because I'm used to sitting with my family in the evening rather than all of us wearing goggles and watching something. So I think consumer behavior is a very funny thing. Some of the best products theoretically, which are drawn up on a drawing, on a technology table, and they look pristine and wonderful, but the consumer rejects them because it's not a pleasurable experience. It's not an easy experience. So given that, I think that's the key thing.
Okay. Thanks, Rahul. This was fantastic. This was very insightful. We'll open it for Q&A. I think we've shot off over 10 minutes from what we expected to do. So we have another 5 to 10 minutes to take questions. I'll read out the first one.
Yeah,
so do you feel that digital media nowadays is formulating more on a clickbaity journalism and sometimes cover irrelevant stories in the name of news? If yes, then what solutions do you pose for the issue? E-paper forecast from subscription point of view. Actually, that's an interesting one. So let's start with the first two questions and then go ahead.
I think the first question is talking about too much noise in the news system compared to what it used to be. Far more a far more knowledgeable space where a lot of information would be curated by experts, and therefore there would be very little noise and very little fake and very little trivial. But the nature of the beast has changed. Everybody today has the ability to jump in and have a voice. And everybody will not be a pristine expert or even someone who cares a damn about sticking to the truth. They have an agenda and they want to further it, and they want their noise to be heard. So is it the best place in the world? No, it's not. You will find excesses, you will find fake stuff, you will find exaggerated reactions, you will find people trying to stack the narrative in a particular way, which is in line with their with what their mandate is, what they're invested with, their trolling. Listen, we have to deal with it. We have to live with it. There's no point saying it's not good. It is there, and we have to deal with it. I'm also a great believer in the fact that audiences are ultimately intelligent audiences. They will pick up the truth. There will always be a large fraction of people who will always, be misled, become victims. That's a reality. It's not the best, but it is there. We can't do anything about it, because the way out of that is censorship, and I think censorship is a slippery slope.
There are these fact-checking sites as well that's coming in.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So there will be a counter reaction of all of that, because ultimately you have to believe in the wisdom of people. You just have to. Otherwise, there is nothing to believe in. They will go through excesses, and they will go through periods where you will be extremely, you'll be alarmed that things have gone out of hand and will never come back. But human civilization has evolved with every crisis. So what you can't wish away, you have to deal with it. You have to deal with. The other one was on e-paper, you said.
Yeah, e-paper from a subscription point of view.
E-paper is the good old paper. I mean, it's you're just taking it on, you're reading it in another format, but it is the old one. I mean, I whenever I travel wherever, I invariably carry the PDF of my favorite newspaper with me. Now, in the morning, I know I won't get it. If I'm overseas, I know I won't get that newspaper because obviously it's not delivered there. But the PDF e-paper is a very, very good substitute for me. So I think that's just an innovative evolution of a very standard product. And if you are the kind of person who still likes to be conventional in some habits, then you'll find it very convenient. I do. I carry it with me everywhere in the world. But it's not a breakthrough innovation or anything like that. It's just a convenience. It's a convenience created by technology, which enables me to consume the way conventional consumption that I enjoy.
Okay. I don't think we'll have time for all of these questions, but there are a couple of questions around the rise of digital media and the failure of conventional media in reporting real issues has led to a lot of students taking up journalism as their higher education. Is this something that you feel has caused the rise of journalism?
Well, I must admit that that digital media has been, at least when we speak about India, has been the savior of mainstream news in this country, because some of the worst excesses can be seen today in linear and legacy media, while digital, because it's young, it's got a lot of fresh energy, it's got a lot of fresh talent, it's got a lot of younger people coming in with with idealism about what the profession should be. They also feel free in an environment where they're not controlled beyond a point. So I think it's a real breath of fresh air. And if what you're saying is true, that more people are taking to journalism, then great power to that. That's very welcome news. I know for a fact that how the Quint and Bloomberg Quint and all the News Minute and all of these properties are really powered by young talent. They are powered by people who are 3, 4, 5, 6 years of experience. But these are powerhouses of talent and commitment, and they may not have 20 years behind them, and thank God for that. But they certainly have so much intellectual energy and so much intellectual curiosity, and they are so talented that, yeah, that's a breath of fresh air. That, I think, is one of the great contributions of digital media, is to bring in so much of young, fresh talent, which is, wanting to experiment, which wants to do things. And I completely debunk that hypothesis which says that younger audiences don't like serious stuff and younger audiences don't want to engage with, long format or serious stuff. My God, they are absolutely engaged and turned on by very serious issues and very serious content.
Right. But just over the time, I'm going to take one last question, which Anupam has posted, which is data privacy is becoming a major concern. How are publishers preparing for this?
Yeah, I think, this is not just a publisher's problem. This is a problem much more when in other areas like e-commerce, and other places, payment gateways, etc. I mean, privacy is a real issue there. Publishers, to that extent, a little bit, we live in an easier world because we don't hold very vital data about our consumers. We don't hold their bank account numbers or their, social security numbers. I mean, those are not germane to our engagement with them. We do hold some of their biological detail and biographical detail. What we do hold is their intellectual predilection as they engage with our content, or as they post certain views and as they post certain thoughts. But since most of those are already in the public domain, I don't think we can breach their privacy. There's very little privacy of intellectual thought between us and our readers and consumers. There's very little privileged information we share with each other. If they feel very strongly about something that we've written or published, they put that very strong view out in the public domain. So the minute it's out in the public domain, there's not much of a privacy issue. So I don't think it's such a big issue for publishers. I think it's much more for other kinds of digital properties.
Great. Thank you. Thanks everyone for logging in. We are well over time right now. We would have loved to answer a lot more questions, and we'll see if we can post some of these questions to Raghav and try to blog about this. But for now, we have to end this webinar. Thanks, Raghav. Thanks for taking the time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise.